Today we're talking about one of the greatest stories in world literature, the Shahnameh. It's the Persian Book of Kings, this incredible, massive epic poem that's a cornerstone of Persian culture, finished over 1,000 years ago. But this is really a story about a mystery right at its heart. What if I told you that the version of this masterpiece that people have been reading for centuries might not be what its author, the great poet Ferdowsi, actually wrote? That's the real question we're digging into today. It's like a literary cold case that's 1,000 years old.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Imagine for a second that you're a literary scholar. The dream, the absolute holy grail, is to find a perfect, untouched text, a direct line straight back to the author's original words. For the Shahnameh, that means hearing Ferdowsi's voice exactly as he intended it, all the way from the year 1010.
But the reality, it is so much messier than that. You have to remember, for hundreds of years, long before printing presses, this epic was copied by hand. And scribes, well, they weren't just photocopiers. They were part editor, part collaborator. And sometimes they were just really enthusiastic sans. They'd add lines, they'd tweak words, they'd even insert their own ideas. It created this tangled web of different versions.
So how in the world do you untangle a mess like that? Well, that's where this field called textual criticism comes in. Honestly, you should just think of it as literary forensics. Scholars basically become detectives, sifting through all these old manuscripts, comparing the evidence, all to try and piece together what the author originally wrote.
All right, our detective story kicks off in the early 19th century. We're in Calcutta, India, and this is the very first major attempt to create a single, standard, printed version of the Shahnameh.
And the challenge they were up against was just immense. I mean, look at this timeline. There was an 800-year gap between Ferdowsi finishing his work and this first printed edition. 800 years of people copying it by hand, with little changes, additions, and errors just piling up one on top of the other. Finding the original and all that noise was a nearly impossible task.
So, a guy named Matthew Lumsden and his team took a heroic first shot at it. They gathered 27 different manuscripts to compare. But here was the big problem. Most of their evidence, most of these copies, were from the 1600s or even later. They were still centuries away from Ferdowsi. The main version they ended up using was full of these later additions. So while it was absolutely groundbreaking, it was a flawed first step. The case was definitely not closed. Okay, now let's jump forward to the 20th century. A new team of literary detectives is on the case, and this time they are bringing a much more scientific, much more rigorous approach to this whole investigation.
So between 1960 and 1971, the Soviet Academy of Sciences in Moscow launched this massive project. The goal was simple: create the most authentic, the most critical edition of the Shahnameh that had ever been produced.
And the Moscow team's big breakthrough came down to their evidence. They managed to get their hands on much, much older manuscripts. Their crown jewel was a copy from London dated all the way back to 1276. This got them about 260 years from Ferdowsi's death. This wasn't just a step forward, it was a massive leap in the investigation. Because of this methodical work and their incredible sources, the Moscow edition pretty much immediately became the gold standard. For decades, if you were a scholar, this was it. This was considered the closest we could possibly get to Ferdowsi's original masterpiece. It was the definitive text. But of course, the story doesn't end there. For all its brilliance, the Moscow edition was built without one final, decisive clue. A piece of evidence that was still out there, just hidden, waiting to be found. The case wasn't quite closed yet. And that brings us to the climax of our story. A totally stunning discovery in a really unexpected place that would completely change everything everyone thought they knew about the Shahnameh. I mean, really think about that for a second. The Moscow edition was this huge, state-sponsored academic project that used the best evidence anyone had ever seen. What could possibly come along and just overturn it?
The year is 1977.
An Italian scholar, Angelo Piemontesi, is doing his work in a library in Florence. And right there, tucked away, basically hidden in plain sight for centuries, he finds it. A manuscript of the Shahnameh that nobody realized was so unbelievably important. Let me put this find into perspective for you. The Moscow team's whole project was built on that London manuscript from 1276, which was, at the time, the second oldest copy known to exist. But this Florence manuscript, it was even older.
that made it the single most ancient and most reliable version ever found. This was the smoking gun.
Now, at this point, you might be asking yourself, okay, cool story, but why does this all matter so much? Why spend centuries searching for the real text? Well, it's about way more than just some academic puzzle. The stakes here are just incredibly high. Every step you get closer to that original text means you're peeling back centuries of additions and changes. It means you get to hear Ferdowsi's true voice, not the echoes of all the scribes who came later. And when you get right down to it, this isn't just about editing a book. It's about preserving a foundational piece of world culture in its most pure, most authentic form. So, from that very first try in Calcutta to the systematic work in Moscow, and then that incredible, game-changing discovery in Florence, this multi-generational detective story has given us the clearest view we have ever had into the mind of a genius and the heart of his epic poem. But it does leave us with one last, kind of fascinating question to think about. Is the real story the one the author first wrote down? Or is it the one that lives and breathes and changes over hundreds of years in the hands of the people who read it and copy it and love it? It's something to chew on.
Welcome. Today, we're going to dive into the ancient, powerful world of myth. And we're going to do it by looking at one of the greatest stories ever told, the Persian epic, the Shahnameh, also known as the Book of Kings.
So, before we get into the epic battles and heroes, let's start with a really basic question. What exactly are myths? And maybe more importantly, why are they so deeply connected to who we are? I think this quote just says it all, really. It describes myth as this incredible mirror that cuts through all the noise. Our jobs, our daily routines, all the stuff on the surface, and it shows us who we really are at our core. Think about it like this. If myth is our identity card, shouldn't we probably know what's written on it? I mean, why do these ancient tales, some of them thousands of years old, still have such a powerful grip on us today? Okay, so to really understand that power, we have to get clear on what a myth actually is, and, just as important, what it isn't. Right, so a myth isn't just some fairy tale. Its main job, its whole reason for being, is to explain creation itself. It tackles the biggest questions you can imagine. How did the world even start? Why do we have these rituals? We're talking cosmic level stuff here, which is why you almost always see gods and sacred events at the center of it all. And that is such a key difference. You've got myths on one side, these sacred stories about the very origin of our world. And then on the other, you've got fables, which are more about teaching a moral lesson inside the world that's already here. You could say myths build the stage, and fables are the plays that happen on it. Now, you might be thinking, okay, myths, that's all ancient history, right? Well, not exactly. They are woven into our modern lives in ways you probably don't even notice. I mean, we all know the science, right? We know for a fact that the Earth goes around the sun, and that the Earth's rotation gives us night and day. And yet, what do we say every single morning? We talk about the sunrise and the sunset, as if the sun is this chariot being driven across the sky. That ancient, mythical way of seeing the world is literally baked right into our everyday language. And get this, it goes way deeper. Our entire week, the very way we measure time, is built on Mesopotamian and Mithraic myths. Just look at the names of the days. They were named for the 7 celestial bodies they saw as gods. Sunday is, of course, the sun's day. Monday is the moon's day. Saturday is Saturn's day. Myth isn't just some old story. It's hiding in plain sight, right on our calendars. Okay, so with all that in mind, let's turn to the Shahnameh, the Persian Book of Kings, and see these ideas in action with the story of Keyumars, the very first king of the world. So our story begins way back in this primeval, ancient time. Keyumars is the first king. He sets up his throne in the mountains and he rules for 30 years. And all the animals, all the creatures of the world, they would gather just to pay him respect. The world was basically a paradise. But this perfect peace sparked this deep, dark envy in the heart of the evil spirit, Ahriman. Ahriman had a son of his own, a demon as fierce as a wolf, and he was dead set on destroying the king's happiness. Sialmak, the noble prince, finds out about this plot. And to defend his father, he gathers an army. But this is an ancient time, remember. There's no armor, no chainmail. So Sialmak goes out to face this demon wearing nothing but a leopard's hide.
The demon's son doesn't even hesitate. He meets Siamak right there on the battlefield, and they just start wrestling, raw, bare-handed combat for the fate of the world. Siamak is brave, for sure, but the demon's strength, it's just monstrous.
The demon grabs the prince, lifts him up, and just smashes him down onto the ground. And with his horrible claws, he tears the life right out of the young prince's body. And just like that, Siamak, the hope of the world, is gone.
When Keyumars gets the news, he literally falls off his throne in grief. The entire world, every person, every animal, every bird, mourns with him for a whole year. Finally, a messenger comes down from the heavens and tells the king, "Stop grieving. It's time to gather your army and wipe this evil from the face of the earth."
Now, Siamak's death and this call for vengeance, it's not just a one-off tragedy. This story actually sets up a powerful pattern, a kind of blueprint that we see again and again throughout the entire Shahnameh.
You see, it's not just a one-time event. We see this exact same cycle repeat with other heroes like Iraj and Siavash. In every single case, a beloved son is murdered unjustly, and a young heir is commanded by a grieving father figure to go and get revenge. This structure becomes a fundamental theme of the whole epic.
So why? Why repeat this pattern over and over? Well, because in the world of myth, these cycles are trying to tell us a much deeper truth about the nature of life itself. You know, in our modern world, we tend to think of time as a straight line, just moving from a start to a finish. But that's not how myth sees it. In myth, time is a circle. It's the constant pattern of winter and spring, of death and rebirth. Just like a seed has to be buried in the dark to grow again, the hero has to fall so that a new generation can rise up and restore order. And this all brings us to this final, really profound thought from Ferdowsi, the guy who actually wrote the Shahnameh. After all the battles, all the grief, all the revenge, what is it that really lasts? It's not the kings, not the heroes, not their wins or their losses. All that remains in the end is the story. A mirror held up for us so we can see who we were and who we still are.